I spent 37 years believing that refusing to forgive made me strong, that holding on to what they did to me was somehow protecting me from being hurt again. I wore my anger like armor. I told myself I was fine. But the truth is that anger was killing me, slowly, quietly, in ways I didn't even notice until my body started to break down. The people who hurt me, they moved on with their lives decades ago, and I was the one still carrying the weight. Forgiveness didn't save them, it saved me. My name is Robert. I'm 71 years old now. I live in a small town in western Pennsylvania, the kind of place where everyone knows your business, whether you want them to or not. I've lived here my whole life, except for the 4 years I spent in the Army right after high school. When I came back, I thought I was coming home to family, to people who loved me, to a life that made sense. I was wrong about that. The wound that never healed didn't come from a stranger. It came from my brother. Michael was 3 years older than me. Growing up, he was my hero. He taught me how to throw a baseball, how to change a tire, how to talk to girls without stuttering like an idiot. When our father died in 1976, Michael stepped up. He was 24, I was 21. He promised me we'd take care of the family business together. Our father had owned a small construction company. Nothing fancy, but it was steady work, and it had kept food on the table for 2 generations. Michael and I were supposed to run it together, equal partners. That's what Dad wanted. That's what Michael promised. But 6 months after the funeral, I found out Michael had been forging documents. He'd transferred the business entirely into his name, cut me out completely. When I confronted him, he didn't even deny it. He just looked at me with this cold expression I'd never seen before and said, "You were never cut out for this anyway, Bobby. I'm doing you a favor." A favor. He took my inheritance, my future, my father's legacy, and called it a favor. I didn't speak to him after that, not for 37 years. People in town tried to get us to reconcile. Our mother begged us, especially in her last years. She died in 2001 without ever seeing her sons in the same room again. I went to her funeral. Michael was there too. We stood on opposite sides of the grave. I remember looking at him across that hole in the ground and feeling nothing but contempt. He'd stolen from me. He'd lied to our dying father. He'd chosen money over family. And I was supposed to forgive that? No. I told myself I was better than that, stronger than that. The thing about carrying anger for that long is that it becomes part of you. You don't even notice it anymore. It's just there, humming in the background of everything you do. I got married in 1982 to a woman named Linda. She was kind, patient. She loved me, even though I wasn't easy to love. We had 2 daughters. I worked as a foreman at a manufacturing plant about 20 miles from town. It wasn't the life I'd imagined, but it was a life. I thought I was doing fine, but Linda knew better. She used to say I had a heaviness about me, like I was always carrying something I wouldn't put down. She was right, of course, but I couldn't see it. Every time someone mentioned Michael's name, my jaw would tighten. Every time I drove past the old construction company, which he'd eventually sold for a small fortune in the 90s, my chest would constrict. Every Christmas, every birthday, every family gathering that he wasn't at, because I'd made it clear he wasn't welcome, I felt that anger bloom fresh all over again. I told myself it was justified. He was the one who'd wronged me. He was the one who should apologize. He never did, and I never reached out. The years piled up. My daughters grew up barely knowing they had an uncle. I didn't talk about him. When they asked, I'd just say we had a falling out and leave it at that. Linda tried a few times to convince me to let it go. "It's been 20 years, Robert," she said once. "Don't you think it's time?" I remember the look on my face must have been something fierce because she never brought it up again. I wasn't ready. I didn't think I'd ever be ready. What I didn't realize was that the anger wasn't just sitting there. It was doing something to me, physically, mentally. I started having trouble sleeping in my late 40s. I'd wake up at 3 a.m. with my heart racing, my mind going over old arguments, old betrayals, imagining conversations I'd never have. I'd lie there in the dark, fists clenched, replaying that moment when Michael looked at me and called his theft a favor. By my 50s, I was on medication for high blood pressure, then cholesterol, then anxiety. The doctors kept telling me I needed to reduce stress. I'd nod and say I'd try, but I didn't know how. Because the stress wasn't coming from work or money or anything I could fix. It was coming from inside me, from that old wound that never healed, from the weight I'd been carrying for decades. In 2019, I had a heart attack. I was 66 years old. It happened on a Saturday morning while I was mowing the lawn. One minute I was pushing the mower across the front yard, and the next I was on my knees in the grass, unable to breathe, my left arm screaming with pain. Linda called 911. I spent 3 days in the hospital. They put in 2 stents. The cardiologist was a young guy, probably in his 40s, with a calm voice and serious eyes. He sat down next to my bed and went through the usual lecture about diet and exercise and quit the occasional cigar. Then he said something I wasn't expecting. "Mr. Brennan, your blood work and your test results show a lot of chronic inflammation. Your cortisol levels are extremely high. That means your body has been in a state of stress for a very long time. Years, probably. Do you have a lot of stress in your life?" I almost laughed. Stress? I had a decent job, a wife who loved me, 2 healthy daughters. What did I have to be stressed about? But then I thought about those sleepless nights. The tightness in my chest whenever I thought about my brother. The way my hands would shake with anger over something that happened 4 decades ago. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I guess I do." He nodded. "Chronic stress is a killer, Mr. Brennan. It's as dangerous as smoking or high cholesterol. Maybe more dangerous because people don't take it seriously. Whatever is causing that stress, you need to deal with it. Because if you don't, your body will keep breaking down." I went home from the hospital with a bag full of pills and a warning I couldn't ignore anymore. I was killing myself, not with a gun or a bottle, with anger, with a grudge I'd held on to so tightly for so long that it had become part of my biology. Linda sat with me that first night home. We didn't say much. She just held my hand. But I knew what she was thinking. I'd always known. She'd been watching me carry this weight for our entire marriage. She'd been watching me destroy myself over something I couldn't change. And she'd been helpless to stop it. That night, lying in bed, listening to her breathing beside me, I started to cry. Not because I was scared of dying, but because I realized I'd wasted so much of my life, so many years, so much energy. All of it poured into hating a man who probably didn't even think about me anymore. I didn't decide to forgive Michael right away. It wasn't like a light switch. Forgiveness doesn't work that way, at least not for me. But I did start to understand something. My anger wasn't hurting him. It was hurting me. He'd taken something from me in 1976, and I'd spent the next 43 years giving him even more. I'd given him my peace, my health, my sleep. I'd let that one act of betrayal define decades of my life. And for what? He wasn't suffering. I was. I started seeing a therapist a few months after the heart attack. That was Linda's idea. I resisted at first because I'm from a generation that doesn't really believe in therapy. You handle your problems yourself. You don't talk to strangers about your feelings. But Linda insisted, and I loved her enough to try. The therapist's name was Dr. Ellen Marsh. She was in her 60s, warm and no nonsense. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. In our second session, she asked me point blank, "What would it take for you to forgive your brother?" I told her the truth, an apology, an acknowledgement of what he did, something. She nodded. "And if he never gives you that?" I didn't have an answer. "Robert," she said gently, "you're waiting for him to free you, but he's not going to. He might not even know you need him to. So the question is, are you going to spend the rest of your life in this prison, waiting for someone else to unlock the door?" That hit me harder than I expected, because she was right. I'd been waiting for 37 years. I'd been waiting for Michael to admit what he'd done, to say he was sorry, to make it right, and he never had, and he probably never would. So what was I going to do? Die angry? Die bitter? Die holding on to something that had already taken so much from me? Dr. Marsh helped me understand something crucial. Forgiveness wasn't about Michael. It wasn't about excusing what he did or pretending it didn't matter. It wasn't about reconciliation or trust or letting him back into my life. It was about me, about choosing to stop carrying the weight, about deciding that I deserved peace more than I deserved revenge. It was survival. I wrote Michael a letter in the spring of 2020. It took me 3 weeks to finish it. I must have rewritten it a dozen times. At first, I kept trying to make him understand how much he'd hurt me. I kept listing all the ways his betrayal had damaged my life, but every time I read it back, it sounded bitter, angry, like I was still trying to punish him. Finally, I stripped it down to the simplest version I could manage. I told him I knew what he'd done. I told him it had hurt me. And I told him I was choosing to forgive him, not because he deserved it, but because I needed to. I didn't ask for anything in return. No apology, no explanation. I just told him I was letting it go. I mailed the letter on a Tuesday. I had no idea if he'd even read it. For all I knew, he'd throw it away. That was okay. The letter wasn't really for him anyway. It was for me. It was my way of saying, I'm done. I'm not carrying this anymore. You don't get to live in my head rent-free for the rest of my life. Michael never responded. I don't know if he read it or not. Part of me hopes he did. But honestly, it doesn't matter, because the weight lifted anyway, not all at once, not completely. But slowly, over the weeks and months that followed, I felt something shift. I started sleeping better. My blood pressure came down. I stopped waking up at 3 a.m. with my mind racing. I stopped clenching my fists when I drove past the old construction company. I stopped feeling that spike of anger every time someone mentioned his name. It wasn't magic, it was a choice I had to keep making. Some days were harder than others. There were still moments when I'd think about what he'd done and feel that old familiar rage start to bubble up. But I'd catch myself. I'd remind myself, this isn't helping. This is just poison. And I'd let it go. Again and again, until it got easier. Linda noticed the change before I did. One night, about 6 months after I sent the letter, we were sitting on the back porch watching the sun go down. She reached over and took my hand. "You seem lighter," she said. I looked at her. "Lighter?" She nodded. "Like you've been carrying something heavy for a long time and you finally put it down." I squeezed her hand. She was right. I had put it down, and the relief was almost overwhelming. I hadn't realized how exhausting it was to be that angry all the time, how much energy it took to hold on to a grudge for 4 decades. Now that I'd let it go, I had space for other things, for joy, for gratitude, for the people who were still here, still in my life, still loving me despite everything. I started noticing things I'd missed before, the way the light came through the trees in the evening, the sound of Linda's laugh, the phone calls from my daughters, little things, but they mattered because I was finally present for them. I wasn't stuck in 1976 anymore. I was here, now, alive. Michael died in January of 2023, heart failure. He was 77. I got the call from a cousin I barely talked to anymore. She thought I should know. I thanked her and hung up. I sat there for a long time, trying to figure out what I felt. Sadness, maybe, but not for him, for what we could have been, for all the years we lost, for the fact that we were brothers and we spent most of our lives as strangers. But I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt tired and grateful. Grateful that I'd forgiven him before he died. Not because it gave us some Hollywood ending where we reconciled and everything was fine. We never saw each other again after our mother's funeral. We never spoke, but I'd let go of the hate. And that meant when he died, I didn't have to carry it anymore. I didn't have to spend the rest of my life angry at a ghost. I went to his funeral. Linda came with me. It was small. He'd outlived most of his friends. His ex-wife was there with their son, a man in his 40s I'd never met. My nephew. I stood at the back of the chapel and listened to the eulogy. They talked about his business success, his love of fishing, his stubbornness. They didn't mention me. That was fine. After the service, I walked up to the casket. I stood there for a moment, looking at his face. He looked old, tired, human. I didn't say anything out loud, but in my head I thought, I hope you're at peace now. I am. Then I walked out into the cold January air and went home. I'm 71 now. I've been retired for 3 years. Linda and I spend most of our time with our daughters and grandkids. We travel a little. Mostly we just enjoy being together, being alive. I still think about Michael sometimes. I still think about what he did. But it doesn't have the same grip on me anymore. It's just something that happened a long time ago to a different version of me. I learned something important through all of this. Forgiveness isn't a gift you give to the person who hurt you. It's a gift you give to yourself. It's not about them deserving it. It's about you deserving peace. I thought refusing to forgive made me strong. I thought it was protecting me, but it wasn't. It was destroying me, slowly, quietly. One sleepless night, one spike in blood pressure, one moment of rage at a time. The people who hurt me, they moved on. They lived their lives. And I was the one stuck in the past, reliving the pain over and over again. Forgiving them didn't save them. It saved me. It gave me my life back. Not the life I thought I deserved. Not the life where everything was fair and people got what was coming to them. But the life I actually had. The one with Linda and my daughters and quiet evenings on the porch. The one where I could breathe deeply and sleep soundly and feel joy without that constant undercurrent of bitterness. That's what forgiveness gave me. Freedom, not from what happened, but from the weight of carrying it. I don't know who you're angry at. I don't know what they did to you. I don't know if they deserve your forgiveness. Probably they don't. Most people who hurt us don't. But I do know this. That anger you're carrying, it's not hurting them. It's hurting you. And you deserve better than that. You deserve peace. You deserve to put down the weight, not because they've earned it, but because you have. Forgiveness isn't weakness. It's not surrender. It's survival. It's choosing life over bitterness. It's choosing yourself. I spent 37 years learning that lesson the hard way. I almost didn't survive it. My heart gave out before my anger did, but I'm still here, and I'm finally free. Not because anyone apologized, not because justice was served, but because I decided I'd had enough. I decided I wanted to live, really live, not just exist in the shadow of old wounds. So I let it go, and it saved my life. Is there someone you haven't forgiven because you thought holding on made you stronger? Has that anger become so familiar you don't even notice the weight anymore? What would your life look like if you put it down?